Welcome everyone. Great to have this audience together to ET India's boardroom panel on revenue stream innovation with digital transformation. I'm joined here today by Rohit Tuteja, who's the director at product at UpGrad, Rahul Khare, who's director global sales for new verticals at Honeywell, Dr. Aloknath, who is executive consulting director and the former CTO of Samsung India. My name is Florian. I lead Bain Company's digital practice in Asia Pacific, and excited to host this discussion with you. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rohit and Rahul. Excited to have this dialogue with you about the topic of revenue kind of innovations through as part of digital transformation. I think what we thought would be useful for the discussion would be maybe we start out with each of you sharing your perspectives on what you've seen at Rockwell and UpGrad particular that worked for you there. They can take the discussion from there. I'm sure there's a series of questions we can dive in as we go through this together. Rahul, can I ask you to start? I think you've got quite a broad view also from your client portfolio.
Sure, Florian, and thank you for inviting me and for this conversation. And the topic itself, as you said, is pretty interesting, and we're talking about revenue streams that can potentially come out of digitalization. And I think so. I talk here from a perspective of actually a technology provider at Honeywell. We are actually partnering with a lot of customers in the industrial space for digital transformation and working on their digitalization roadmaps. So one of the key things that, of course, the fundamental reason or the level at which most customers today would be is to drive productivity and efficiency within their organizations. And some of the other use cases go broader. They go into safety, particularly in the industrial context. It's a very important piece. Right, and essentially everything that gets done is to drive faster decision making. Now, how some of the customers are innovatively extending that to drive innovation and potentially starting new revenue streams is, in my view, at least from what I have seen across the globe, is twofold. One of the things that we see as a trend is that through this, people are able to come up with newer products, and because of the amount of information, amount of AI and ML ability that's available, the customers are able to come up with newer products in their existing set of portfolio. And some of them have actually gone a notch higher and are also able to create or sometimes co-create IP with some of the technology providers, which then gets taken to the market. The go-to-market could be by themselves, through the technology provider, or jointly. And that's something we also see up in the market now, where joint IP gets created, particularly on this in the space of, say, process technology or some of the applications that could be built in, having intelligence coming in from their vast experience and years of data that they may have. So those are two essential ways in which we are seeing innovation that the customers are able to do. The second one in particular is pretty exciting because some of these companies who are say real economy manufacturing companies are getting into co-creating IP and taking it to market, which is essentially in a software or digital space, right? So it's a new space for them. So yeah, I think those are a couple of things that I wanted to quickly highlight. Back to you, Florian.
Great. No, I think very interesting, and also kind of great to see that mix of, as you were already highlighting, improving what's there versus actually opening up completely new opportunities for many companies, which is particularly exciting. We've been joined by Dr. Aloknath from Samsung as well. Thanks so much for making it. It's maybe kind of continued around the room, and Rohit, keen to hear your views as well, what you've seen over the last 2 years in particular, what you see, and then we can go to Aloknath as well.
Okay, so
absolutely.
So, sorry about being a little late on another occupations. This is an interesting topic, and I think the revenue streams, how we are creating Obviously, for Samsung, let me go in this round as devices. We make the digital appliances, home appliances. So for us, that is the core part of it. It is a product. But as we can see, there are two different directions. Things are changing. One, the product itself, the people at the end have to get a consumer experience. So it's not just the product. So certain elements of the experience that we add, and obviously you can even monetize that. And the other part of it is, as we are connecting these devices, we can create for ourselves and for others the new revenue streams on this AI-infused IoT, which I've been handling. So how do you make this connected world and benefit out of these? So these are two main directions. And if I can take one more thread, is that in the device itself, one natural way is preload, right? Lots of applications people need to have in smartphone and now going into smart TV. So that itself, the real estate in this is very precious. And therefore you can demand a premium for that, and where it appears, how often does it appear, which are the models that you could have it. And so obviously the preload exercise. Then in the apps itself, most of the app players are either freemium model if they are doing. So obviously a certain level of it you can do on the free mode, but then there is a premium part of it and it will be monetized. And so obviously it can be revenue shared in that structure. You have the ad spaces, even -1 page we call, or certain other names, that those are the real estate again. And you can deeply engage with others in advertisements, in kind of informative news, and still able to monetize. So these are certain models. And then going into customer services and experience, I'm sure, there are things like, for example, in our Galaxy, we have a Galaxy Care program. So yes, we give guarantee for a certain period, but if you would love to take it for next 3 years, 5 years, all kinds of coverage, then that itself also brings in some way the monetization part. So I'll pause here and maybe go with the flow in the next round.
Great. Rohit, keen to hear your experience as well and hear what you've seen. Maybe we kind of dive into a few topics after that specifically.
Sure, absolutely. In terms of the word innovation itself, it's I always get perplexed by this word with the reality of the word and the perception of the word. When you talk about innovation, the perception which comes in, which is something which is a breakthrough, something unique which the world hasn't seen, and so on and so forth. How I look at innovation is in two ways. One, in form of efficiency, that how do you bring in and make your processes better, which can actually enhance your revenue stream through innovation. And the other is actual getting into newer revenue streams, either by innovation or just by simply finding out the problem, which is either not organized and broken out in the market in non-digital space, or really getting to a newer technology which can solve the real life problem. Now for us, at UpGrad, as we look at it, and while the perception outside could be that all the online players who come in are absolutely system or automation driven, that's not entirely true. A lot of that, I usually look at the model of, I like to put the acronym of MSA, which is manual systems and automation. All the happy flows or something which is more user facing and which drives you towards automation is usually started as in a completely automated way. But there are a lot of systems and manual activities which happen in the back end, which is not visible to a lot of folks. And I think what we are doing at UpGrad is making those systems and manual activities automated to make sure that the model becomes scalable, and the revenue stream, if you are today, if we are servicing one country, how can we go to servicing 40 countries without making any more people hiring or increase in the processes, but just using digital power to expand and scale. The other side is, when we started off at UpGrad from a offering perspective, online education was new, and we were offering it for working professionals who wanted to upskill themselves. And now we have innovation coming in form of people wanting to do their undergraduate and postgraduate online as well. So that's another revenue stream which has opened up, and the innovation of really be able to deliver the absolutely similar or a better experience than the students will get in an offline world online is a huge huge innovation on the side of online learning, which is really helping us a lot.
Yeah, great. Now it sounds like all three of you had a fair share of battle scars, I think, in accelerating revenue over the last 2 years, but also before that through digital technology. I'd love to kind of separate the discussion a little bit into two parts from here. I mentioned this to you before, but one more on the existing revenue streams. And I think, Rohit, you were also alluding to this just now, where it's really more around selling more efficiently, selling more, potentially pricing better, and one more on the new adjacent revenue streams. And I think Rahul really gave some nice examples there on industrial clients who starting to actually sell software, SaaS type solutions, or Aloknath, you were talking about kind of different kind of solutions that Samsung is selling now beyond just the core device, which I think is quite exciting as well. So maybe starting on the existing revenue streams. I mean, keen to hear experiences actually, what worked and what didn't. I mean, broadly, I think the landscape is pretty clear. You've got marketing channels where probably shifting the landscape much more to digital and much more ROI-driven marketing. You've got kind of go-to-market channels, so both platforms, but also your own direct-to-consumer, probably with kind of mixed with more legacy channels. You've got the ability to price differently with digital, potentially some more discriminatory pricing based on this actual customer need, but also new segments they can access with lower pricing overall. Customer segments. Keen to hear your views. What has actually worked? Like what has clicked in the market versus what was more noise in the ocean, I want to say.
For the last 2 years, I think it's been a bull run, as you see in the stock markets as well, for all the companies. With pandemic coming in, those who had the digital shops, everyone benefited. I look at it from the perspective that, when everyone is benefiting, do you remain happy with what you've got because everyone is in green today? Or you look at from a perspective of, oh God, I could have gotten more. Because what are you benchmarking against? Now, if you have improved by 2x and the market has gone up by 5x, that means you could be happy that we have improved by 100%, but there is a 300% which you have left on the table because you possibly didn't have a strategy and you had an ostrich approach looking internally. And therefore, over the last couple of years, I think everyone has benefited. So have we. While we have had our gains in terms of the number of just the market acceptability of online learning going up, and we had scaled up our potential learners coming in, I think many of the firms were caught unawares as well, as we didn't necessarily have the retention strategy for the top of the funnel. If earlier we were able to convert a certain percentage, during COVID the funnel increased, but not necessarily the conversion remained intact. The conversion may have gone down. So at net you had a positive increase and a solid one to show, but there could have been more. And I think that's what we are working on right now. While we did a few initiatives over the 2 years, it was a long period, and we have seen benefits of that with an improved conversion. And we are working on it more and more on the strategy to funnel the top of the funnel in a way that the conversion remains intact or improves to have a better bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah, interesting. So really more kind of also the conversion retention game. Kind of like marketing the funnel was fed for everybody, with conversion retention as a key theme to really get the revenue up. Interesting. Does it reflect your experiences, Rahul and Aloknath?
Yeah, I could take it up. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, what was getting mentioned is about how you're doing on the digital and the benefit of the digital transformation earlier probably was slow, but with COVID pandemic, those who are fully into there, they got the benefit, and you ask for more, right? So that's a very natural thing. What I have seen in our cases, and not just Samsung, but in general of the device-centric world, many of us were fully onto the stores earlier. Let's say 10 years back, if you go, it was just the stores. There was no online stories, right? How you sell, how you do things, and even services and everything. You have to go physically somewhere to get it done. From there, some of the other people have also moved maybe a little bit more online. You asked the question, what worked, what didn't work. Now, online discounts, when it went deeper, the offline people were not very happy because I'm maintaining a stores and you are giving it in a lower price through some other channel at the end, the consumers, then how do I survive? So that kind of sentiments to how do you bring both of them and online, offline? I think the COVID time, what we saw is it became omni-channel. Yeah, I mean, obviously during this period, online worked, but I think the offline people also educated themselves. Maybe starting point is offline, but then can you take it to online for the final services and still give the similar rates? And companies like ours also learned how to position and what is the right pricing points to do it so that both parties could be there. So I think the point I'm trying to make is people had this different journey starting points of online or offline, and now it's all omni-channel and everybody has a mix and we don't need to do a separate pricing point. So this equilibrium, the new equilibrium point is something that has emerged over time. And I believe, on top of all the other points that I mentioned, like customer services, now we can do even online. You can check if your mobile, if you hold it, I can test it and give you a price quote, not even visiting the shop saying, if I want to do a replacement, what price would I like to offer? So these kinds of things is a real benefit of the digital transformations. And this omni-channel journey is a very solid one, and it will take us to the next step.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I think also I'm going to pick up on one theme here, the omni-channel idea. And I think the increased relevance of offline assets in that process actually makes you as a, want to say, old school player much more attractive as well on this landscape again, if you have your online game under control. So very, very good point. Rahul, what's your views on this?
Yeah, so in the industrial space, right? So I think industrial is probably the other end of the continuum versus, let's say, what Rohit talked about, where the adoption is probably among the highest, and industrial is usually a bit of laggard in terms of technology adoption, primarily because of the complexity of operations, people, all of that's involved. Now, so one of the things that we saw, particularly in the heavy industrial space, was that COVID kind of forced everybody to cut down on the staff that could be permitted in the factories or in the plants, etc. Right? So one of the big themes that started coming up, which obviously existed before, but the adoption suddenly accelerated, was that of remote operations. Right? Do you actually need all your experts to be at site? So let's say if there is a large manufacturer with multi-site, multi-location, multi-plant kind of operations, and each plant would also have its own technology differences and nuances, how do you really work through that kind of a situation? And if you have got, let's say, 5 experts on a certain space, how do they move around 7 plants or 9 plants? They would not be able to, given the restrictions. So can we centralize the operations? Can there be a remote kind of working setup where, let's say, I am at the field and you're at a central control room, and I'm able to relay what I see here as a problem, and you're able to guide me in terms of what needs to be done. Now, those, while sound simple, I mean, it's like getting on a video call with your mom, right? But that's in the industrial space, it gets slightly complicated because of the zone issues in terms of safety, etc. So there are hazardous zones. the zone categorization, not all devices are permitted in all kind of zones, right? So those things come up, and then how much data because a lot of plants may not actually be on Wi-Fi altogether. Cellular may be weak. So how do you relay data? Can I relay a video, or do I do it over picture? Should I describe? Right. So those things suddenly would crop up as bottlenecks. And the good part is that over this last 1.5 years, 2 years kind of journey, the industry has taken a big leap in this direction. In fact, what I'm talking about is something that most customers who are technology adopters are actually doing. Right, and let's not also kind of get this impression that it's only the larger players who are doing. In fact, particularly in India, where I think people get technology quickly, right? So even the smaller players, smaller plants, some of the SMB segment, as we call them, small and medium scale businesses, they are quite tech savvy and are able to actually quickly do some of these things. And the number of pilots that are happening in the industry today on various types of use cases around making this remote operation a reality, plus also managing competency at an organization level, right? How do you really channelize your centers of excellence, maybe located at one location across your enterprise? I think those are things that are working at an amazing level. Technologies like cloud and AI ML getting far ahead also is helping the enablement of these. But I think so we are at that kind of a stage where a lot is happening, and I think some of the real results in terms of business impact, the numbers would probably be seen in a few years' time. But then so much happening in industrial space, I think these are exciting times.
Yeah, no, I think great to hear that, and I think also a good theme on the ability to collaborate much more seamlessly now,
yes.
Which I think in the B2B space obviously is hugely relevant, versus always having to send your field force out or do an actual physical trip. I think all our lives have changed in that regard over the last 2 years. Quite
and if you see the key theme that cuts across all of these, any adoption that happens of technology, the key theme would always be centered around efficiency, productivity, safety, and you'll see how these things get enabled through all of this. In fact, some of the latest conversations around, say, sustainability, net zero, all of it is actually being enabled by digital transformation, because the first step of getting to net zero or carbon neutrality or your sustainability journey is to first measure what you're doing, right? So I think that itself is a huge challenge, a huge task. And I think the amount of action again that's going on there is huge. So as I said, exciting times.
No, I think that's a great point. I think also around sustainability, net zero, I think the amount of new business opportunities that are emerging, to your point, just on measurement and then on addressing the root cause is tremendous, both in the B2B and B2C space. And Rahul, kind of going to Rohit and Aloknath afterwards again, but kind of keen to also continue with you quickly on the next theme wanted to dive in a bit, which is the question of new revenue streams or actually completely new business models potentially for companies. And I think we spent some time now talking around what we saw working on accelerating existing revenue, but we also see a lot of truly new business models coming up, and both kind of close related adjacencies. And Aloknath, I'd love to get your views on this in a minute on the Samsung story, where I think there's a lot you can do on just around the device, quite closely linked. But Rahul, you were also referring to industrial companies going into software, which I think is a very interesting topic. I think it's this whole shift to services has been underway for a while, but kind of going from a box to a software piece, I'm sure is an interesting transition. So I'd love to get your views, what you've seen there, what has worked, where companies have struggled.
Yeah. So see, the key driver there is the ability to mine the IP that a lot of these players have actually gathered over decades of operations, right? And that information to be analyzed, channelized, synthesized, I think the technology was not up there to handle that kind of data, right? What we call as big data. I think we were not there in terms of technology. And over last few years, those capabilities have really come up. Now that IP, so a simple example of it is, let's say a large chemicals manufacturer, for instance, would have so much learning coming out of their 2, 3 decades, 4 decades of operations. Can they use that and maybe productize it in the form of IP, which can be used by, say, new entrants or smaller players to improve their efficiency today? And they don't have to go through that learning curve of 40 years and learn it by themselves, right? So, and that is the big driver. Now, the business model here could be you give it as a service, you create a software out of it, which kind of helps people analyze and use or maybe benchmark their operations against something which is, say, a standard. So those kind of business models are possible. They're early days here. And by the way, it's not very new. Some of the in the oil and gas space, some of the bigger players like, say, Chevron and Exxon always used to have a bit of technology that they would license out to players. Now, I think what we are seeing is a similar thing happening at a bigger scale, enabled by technology and digital. And I think that to me is something which is going to be an additional revenue stream for the companies who have this rich IP or rich data available within themselves. And you already, I mean, I would not be naming customers who are already in this journey and we are working with. But then what I can tell you definitely is that this is something where when we go at an enterprise level, talk to CXOs, this is definitely top of the mind for most of them today, right? Mining their data, creating IP out of it, because this is gold, right? This is gold.
Very interesting. No, actually, I would love to kind of, Rohit, get your quick views on this, on the data mining side and kind of building businesses out of this. I suspect this is something that is quite close to your heart and something you spend a fair amount of time on as well, Rohit.
Absolutely. I think big data is helping us a lot. And, I earlier talked about the automation which we're doing, and also as a part of that, the retention strategy which we are creating. So as a part of the retention strategy, you get all kinds of people, and we are able to, while we work on a more of a freemium model there, but we are able to get a lot of information about different segments and markets, which helps us really identify the problems and the opportunity areas where there is a lot of interest. For example, if we are a hard skill player, if you will, where we have programs like data science, digital marketing, software development, etc. But in some areas where we tested a freemium model to offer some kind of soft skills to the users, and we found a lot of interest there as well, which could be different to the hypothesis we may have. So such avenues allow us to go deeper into the data, carve out the segments, and really be able to build new revenue streams out of it. And for that, we have a two-pronged strategy where some of them we create internally, and if we believe that we do not have the expertise, with the integrations becoming so open and so easy nowadays, it's easier to go inorganic, find someone who is not able to scale the business but has good technology sitting with them and a good product sitting with them. It's easier to merge or acquire those companies and integrate to offer a new product line which you can. And with the boundaries between industries just completely being hazy, it's just crazy how different technology companies who would have started with a different core services altogether are moving into services which would not be in their zone. We know the case of Apple and Kodak, where Apple has now become the synonym for cameras or high quality pictures and movies being shot on them. Who would have thought of it? And similarly, in our case, I think while this is more about understanding from big data and getting new innovations in the place, there is a lot in terms of how do we how do we broaden our horizon and put a mission statement? So while we started with serving the working professionals who wanted to upskill themselves, as we looked at it and we looked at lifelong learning, we put our mission as anyone who is starting, who is between 80 to 60 years, and numbers are just proxy, but essentially who is starting to get into undergraduation and until they retire. Any lifelong learning experience is something which UpGrad as an ecosystem can provide, and that's where we look at new revenue stream. Some of the acquisitions we have done over the last 1 year, where it was not part of the core but serving the mission we have. That helps us open new revenue streams, and similarly, within our core, we have realized that we started off as an online model, but there is a huge demand for studying abroad, and which is a new sort of adjustment to the product and a new service which has come up, where half the time learners are studying online for a year, and for the next year they are going outside of India or outside of their base countries to study in a different university, which is a blended model which has come up, and that's really proving to be a very, very potential growth stream for us on the revenue side.
Yeah, it's been great to see the experimentation you're doing there. And Dr. Aloknath, I'm keen to get your views on this as well. I assume you took a little offense when Rohit mentioned that Apple has become synonymous with great cameras, because clearly that is Samsung. But outside of that, I mean, keen to hear views on like what you've experimented with on new revenue streams and what has worked for you.
Sure. And since Rohit and Rahul both mentioned about either AI or data and automations, so I think let me talk in two parts. One, just the single device itself. And what we additionally have is lots of sensors. In today's camera is one type of sensors, but then there is PPG sensors, there is light sensors, many things that are there inside. So we know exactly what's going on. In fact, I could, if I see internal plots of the data of the sensors, I could even characterize, if I wanted to do a PhD on people's behavior, we could even go to that far. But coming back to the revenue streams, simple thing like a feature, suppose I'm inside a house or in the night or I'm bright sunlight, I could detect and I could adjust the brightness of the screen accordingly so that, I don't have to change every time. So this is a feature. Obviously, you can't monetize from there. But when you have many such sensors together and things like not just smartphones, but the wearables that are come, there are many sophisticated algorithms that are coming up for the health monitoring. And we have Samsung Health already sitting, partnering with others and being able to do BP measurements, ECG, and things like that. And it will only grow over time. So what's happening? This is creating a new business model because the insurance companies are very keen. But earlier, the data was not sufficient, 1 or 2 points, not accurate enough. So therefore, they could not rely on that, and they had to do a flat charging for everybody. But now, actually, a person in good health could have a different premium like the person who is not. And immediately, you don't have to do very minutely, like no claim bonus on automotive insurance if you have not charged it. Similar to that, if you are in good health, obviously, you can have 3 brackets of insurance premium. You can start like that, and then over time, fine tune. So I think I see these sensors, wearables, smartphones, getting the data, partnering with this health insurance company. So this is one new revenue stream that I could consider. The other part that we see is from the connectedness. So we have Smart Things, which is a platform which is connecting the smart home, all the digital appliances, and 200 million devices are connected today. Now, one is to give them the service and just the power of the data itself for the individual devices. But as a company, the concept of upselling or cross-selling comes into play. And I don't know whether you will still call it a new revenue stream, but to us, you would not have got that business otherwise. And it's not a typical upgradation. It's a new stream, that will help us to have more engagement with people, get at the right time, when they want to replace. And I could know that, if people in the world are having lights and other kinds of home devices, what do they buy next? Typically, we have seen if this is the first device, then 20% of the people buy device Y after that. And so if somebody has bought this, we could even prompt it, do it, or if they have those devices they are not using, I can tell them how rest of the world is using it effectively and grow on the consumer experience. So this concept of whether it's box selling devices or increasing experience or timely informations to be able to, that is also falling under the experience growth. I think these are things that we could do. So I'll stop here with these two examples. One of the additional in the health insurance side, and one is from the connectedness, what we could benefit from.
And Dr. Day, just for comfort, I use a Samsung device.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Rohit.
Good save there, Rohit. Great. No, I think those were excellent examples, and I was particularly struck by also some of the mechanics you employed and used here. And I think, Rohit, you were alluding to the use of M&A to build the capabilities in-house. To Aloknath, you were referring to the idea of, I think, partnering with insurance companies to open up new revenue streams. And I think that comes to the next topic I'd just love to get your views on, which is, this is obviously not easy. Like, it's new approaches to how you sell things. It's actually reinventing business models. It's realigning internally because you need a team to go after this. You probably need budget to go after this, which is always everybody's favorite infight. I'd love to get your views on kind of what has worked for you, how you've made this happen internally, because experimenting with insurance companies, driving an M&A process for a company that may be a great fit for you, but may actually be quite different to what you're doing, not straightforward. So I'd love to get your views, and maybe kind of Rohit, I'll just staying with you for a second and also get Rahul's views on this. So Rohit, if you want to share first, and then maybe Aloknath, you can add to that.
Sure, absolutely. I think just from there are two perspectives on organizational resistance. I think one is the fact that the change today is the only constant, and that's the cliche everyone has heard. But the skills required to make the change, because we are changing so fast. Earlier, bigger companies who have taken a particular moat or an area of expertise, and they have just grown, developed, penetrated on that particular area. Those skills, while these are good at a certain level, now the skills are changing, where the demand today is to be more fungible, more agile, and to be ready for change every minute. And the other side of the spectrum is the resistance, which is the usual human resistance to change, to anything. And therefore, I think there are two opposite forces which is making the change difficult, but it's the reality. And therefore the fight is between not just overcoming the change from the perspective of making that happen, but also having talent who can make that change. And on the organizational side, I think what has, and we have been in a constant change mode over the past 5 to 6 years. There are two ways on which we look at it. One is the fact that how do you build scalable system in a modularized fashion, and there you have to take a very it's more art than science, I guess, where you have to take an intuitive call of the compromise between quick to market versus building it right. Many companies in their growth phase today work on, and I'm talking from a technology perspective, they put everything in a monolith, they grow, and at a point in time, everyone goes through that cycle of rewriting the whole tech again, and taking that big punt of slowing the systems down for some time. And while we have seen some examples where people have built modularized system from start, and they may not have, and the investment and the time is of course higher, but they have been able to scale very quickly as they go about it. And when those scalable systems are in place, the resistance we have seen is relatively lesser. But if I take an example of our own organization, where we started off with as an online company, but as a part of the learner journey, there is an application which a learner fills, and after that, based on the eligibility of the learner, and if there are eligibility tests related to it, they go through a shortlisting process. And for a period of time, we had shortlisting done by an army of people who were doing the shortlisting, and eventually it plateaued at a time, because you can't scale it at a level how the top of the funnel was growing. And then we had to take a punt and make shortlisting automated. And by doing that, there was a huge resistance in terms of moving that out of the human angle of it, and making it happen through technology. So the two challenges we faced there, and I think we were lucky in a way that because we were growing, we had enough place where it's not just about making automation, but how do you if there are people in the organization, how do you find other roles for them, or make their services utilized in other areas, and also picking up larger areas which could help unlock a lot of opportunity for the company to grow it where humans cannot do, and technology comes in and helps you do that immediately.
Yeah, no, I think a great example also kind of reflect how you deal with the organizational displacement it can create. So very good points. Aloknath, do you want to add something to this, or give you something?
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just trying to say your other parts of the questions, that the big organizations, so size of the organizations and how do you maneuver for M&A and all kinds of things, partnerships, and who is going to earn what revenue. So all of those aspects of it. So the challenge that we see, and I'm not saying just Samsung, but talking to many people that in bigger organizations. So what's your core and what's your periphery? This is what I want to do it myself, and this is what I would like to partner because they are strong and they know what to do it. So that's one part of the story. And big organizations always have some entity who is doing piecemeal of the other things, right? So it's to draw that line and to make sure, the IPs of each one is respected in a right way. So that's, I think, is one journey. And more so, if there's a short term that I'm going to be not doing, maybe engage somebody, but long term, I have a plan. So how do you cut that out, communicate it very clearly that this is a 3 years deal and we have these aspirations, but today we do it like that. And then who is the front ending? Who is earning the revenue in a revenue share? Sometimes we might be the main channel and earning the revenue and paying a pie to the other partners. Or in some cases, if it's a very service-oriented and ad platform and things like that, that possibility is coming from another source of revenue and then going back and flowing it. So I think taking stock of this whole thing and then agreeing to that, respecting that, maneuvering inside to make that happen with everybody's consent, this is a gigantic task. And then if we can take it, and leadership is all about making that happen. Sometimes we see roadblocks and slowness and things like that in general in such bigger things, but mostly I think we are able to break through. And if people can see that you are able to monetize or you're able to grow consumer experience, so pegging points are these. I mean, obviously they're not exclusive. Consumer experience has to be there all the time. But if it's not increasing, but at the same level you are able to monetize, new or old, whichever ways, then that's a good answer. That brings that consensus very, very quickly. Or, if you can quantify the consumer experience. Earlier we talked about data, but the data is data, but how do you define that, the service experience level? This, if we can objectify, it is quite a lot today, subjective, but if we can objectify, then we have a point there, and possibly, again, the consensus comes quicker.
Yeah, very interesting. No, I think great to hear about your experience there as well. Rahul, keen to get your thoughts here, because I have to imagine that in an industrial context, this is even harder than for some of the newer tech companies that I think Rohit and Dr. Aloknath represent.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's right. But one of the interesting things, and I was listening to both of them very keenly, I think the common element here is resistance from whom, right? From people, the human element. And I think that's kind of common across across the size of the company or the nature of the business, I guess. I think, but to your point, yes, because some of the companies, the way of working, and also it's got to do with the demography in terms of the workforce, right? So all of that comes in together, and there is obviously always a resistance to change. And I think one of the key things that companies that are doing it successfully have realized quickly is that digitalization is not about technology, or it's not an IT play, right? Or it's not even an OT play. It is actually a cultural shift in an organization. It's actually changing the way you go about doing your work. So I think that's an important piece, and companies that have realized that are approaching it from a change management perspective, which includes the people side of it, and also would mean that some of the people would need reskilling, or there could be newer kinds of roles that will get originated out of this whole journey of digitalization. So I think some of those learnings have come in over a period of time, and people have, or the companies have been able to do it. I want to pick up one point that Rohit mentioned, and I think it was very, very pertinent, and it has its own place in the industrial setup as well, which is around the technologies or the products being enterprise grade, right? The way you architect them, in a sense that you can actually scale it up quickly. And I think that has been a key to success in the industrial setup. Otherwise, in a large organization, touching every plant, touching every site, and every aspect of operations is a journey of decades, right? And I'm not saying enterprise grade makes it a snap of a moment, but what it still does is it cuts it down to maybe a few months or years. And therefore, it's important that the technology is also able to match that kind of enterprise level expectations. And once the two meet, which is an intent from the organization to address it as a change management and cultural shift than just a technology shift. And then if you get the right set of technologies and products to support your journey, products that are enterprise grade, scalable, I think then you've got it. So that is the key to really manage this whole resistance. One of the key things, and again, Rohit alluded to this, is and I refer to it as pilots in terms of technology pilots. So you start small, get the buy-in, demonstrate results, and then you scale it up, because, and I'm sure it's similar everywhere, the kind of investment that goes in, if you have to scale up at an enterprise level, is huge, right? So you cannot go wrong after making that investment. And therefore, and let's also not think that the resistance is only from the user side of it. The resistance could also be from the management or the leadership, because it will also mean a certain amount of investment, and there would always be options to put that money or that dollar in, right? So therefore, demonstrating the benefit quickly is important. And you do it in a piloted way, and then you scale it up, and that scale up should then be fast, so that the results and the benefits are realized across the organization. So I think I kind of mentioned 3-4 things, but all of this comes together for an organization to have a successful change management, if I may use that term again, in this journey. Otherwise, I mean, there have been multiple examples of stuff that has been started but did not see the light of the day. And by the way, even within some of the companies that have done it well, there have been instances of use cases tackled or instances of problems that were picked up to solve for that could not really be successful. So it has been a mixed bag even for some of the people who are doing well.
Yeah, I think that's excellent point, Rahul. Actually, you kind of almost immediately answered my last question I had, which was what advice would you give other companies embarking on this? Which sounds like this is your piece of advice, which I think is quite valuable.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, I mean, since we are on that, maybe let me take it first. I think the important piece there is to realize that it's a journey, right? So you're not going to be there in the first day. It's a journey. You have to persist with it, and that requires a certain amount of belief that what you're embarking on is the right thing to do, right? The details of it would get figured out. There will be points where you will have to pivot. You'll have to be agile enough to really make those shifts along the way. But as long as you're convinced that belief is there, that you are in it for the long haul and you treat it as a journey, I think it has yielded results for companies that we partner with in this space. It's only when we try to solve isolated problems the problem arises, because then what you have is, people use that term a lot in our industry, which is you have a museum of technologies, right? And then suddenly you have 10 of them and these technologies don't talk to each other. And now you want to scale up and you have nowhere to go. You don't know how to really access information from one set of, say, softwares or your technologies to the other. And the real benefit which comes at the enterprise level is not realized. And then you end up kind of redoing the whole thing. And I mean, the challenges are enormous. You get a system integrator to really read information from everything, create a data lake again. So all of those things are enormous costs that would come up if you don't really think about it in the right way right from the beginning. So I think from those perspectives, I think a bigger picture is important right from the beginning. That's point number one. Treating it as a journey is important. You have to persist with it. And I think there has to be a certain amount of belief within the organization that this will yield results, and therefore you persist with it. And of course, the last one, which is kind of beaten down to death in terms of conversations around this topic, is being agile, being able to pivot along the journey. So yeah, those would be some of my thoughts in terms of what do you really do to get it right.
Yeah, no, I think some great points there. I think the memorable phrase I will take away that I hadn't heard before is museum of technologies. I can certainly attest to some of my clients looking like this. So interesting turn of phrase. Rohit, do you want to build on this? Any advice you would have for companies on embarking on this?
Yeah, I think I have 3 points to make here. First and foremost is the first principles approach, which is tried and tested. That what problem is it solving, and whether the journey you're taking or the changes you're making, is it improving the customer experience in any way, or is it saving you cost? Or is it helping you in revenue? And both of these could be, because it is scalable and helps you in revenue or opens up new revenue streams. The second is that keep the eye on competitor, but don't blindly follow them. It's one of the principles Jeff Bezos also talks about. That's important to look at what is there in the market, what different folks are doing. But you don't know in your circumstances whether that will work or not, or whether it's working for others or not. Because you talk about stuff, the results only follow, and any new thing in the market does not mean that has been tried and tested. The third thing is the fact that technology is not the goal but an enabler. So just looking at great technologies like AR, VR, or blockchain, etc. They will keep coming. There will be more technologies coming in the future, but what use cases does it solve for you? and how does technology really enable things rather than having a technology which you can speak highly of. And there have been a lot of instances, AR VR has been, or AI being talked about for the last 10-12 years, but all the advancements in AI has essentially happened in the supervised AI, which is typically teaching this is a cat, this is not a cat, and that's the basic example you given, and then scaling on that repetitive tasks. How can you make that smarter and do it faster? But there hasn't been too much advancement in stuff like the general AI, which is about how humans behave and how can technology replicate that. So I think technologies will keep coming and going, but what we have to focus on is how does it help.
Yeah, no, some excellent points also kind of in terms of how we should think about this. Aloknath, any closing words from you? Any other advice you would add to this?
Sure. I think Rahul pegged the right point, in terms of people and their divergence of thoughts and the culture part of it and the resistance. So that's on bottom portion of it. And Rohit mentioned about, the end goal of consumer experience and the pricing, cost, effectiveness, efficiency, all of those are the end objectives. So the point I would like to add is that is the leadership role, that how do you, the organizations, how do you understand why people are not agreeing, what are they not agreeing upon, right? Getting to the crux of it and synthesizing those. There are many excellent points that would be there why they are objecting to it, and then there are some frivolous comments. So I think understanding it well and the tools that we have in our hand, whether the technology is going to be obsolete, museum of technology that talked about, or whether the business model is not appropriate. Are we ahead of time? Are we just following competition where we shouldn't be following? I think many of these points that came up, these are, in my opinion, are the tools that the leader has, and the ability to synthesize, to understand well, to find which tool would work and make them, a consensus view. Then only I think we would be able to deliver, and we are there to deliver. So we can't say, because of X or Y or this or that, it didn't work. This is our job to make that happen. So I will stop at that. Thank you.
Great. I think this was a great closing word, actually. I think the role of leadership and really shaping this journey, making sure we're in the right path. And some excellent comments also. I definitely learned a lot today from this group. It was very interesting dialogue. I think we did not ultimately solve if Samsung or Apple makes better cameras, but outside of this, definitely a lot of good ideas on revenue stream innovation through technology. And yeah, Rahul, Rohit, I really appreciate you making the time for this. Very interesting discussion, and great to have had this discussion with you.